Now, if you're watching the course in the order that I put it together, and it doesn't always turn out that way because in editing, sometimes we find it's a little better to move it around. But if you have already viewed the Creating Delegates videos, now's a good time to be watching this one because I want to touch on anonymous methods. These things are a little bit tricky and confusing to people sometimes. But let's look at a simple example of them. Delegates point to methods. We've already established that. A delegate is nothing more than a type-safe function point to a method. It treats our methods kind of like classes. We can easily change the method that's assigned to the delegate. And that's the cool part of those. And a standard delegate requires a method to point to, a method with the appropriate signature. Now, what if the method that the delegate will point to will only be used one time? There's no real need for a separately named method out there just to call it one time and never use it again. And so in those instances, we can use an anonymous method. And anonymous methods are used in a number of places, but for right now, if you can get this in your head and have it make sense, you'll understand the value of anonymous methods. An anonymous method is a method really that we build and declare in line at the point of instantiating a delegate. But since we don't really need to call this method over and over, we don't give it a name. The compiler, the runtime, kind of gives it a name in the background and just executes it for us. And the best way to understand this is to see it in code. So notice I've created a project in Visual Studio 2012 entitled Anonymous Methods. You will see this project out there in your work files folder. And let's take a look at one of these things and I'll code it up here. The first thing we want to do is instantiate or create our delegate. And we need to do this at the class level. So we're going to get outside any other subs here. And I'm just going to paste this in so that you don't have to watch me type. And notice we're creating a public delegate. It returns an integer. The name is rmdel, and then it's expecting an integer to be passed in. All right. Now, I'm also going to do something else a little differently that I've done in other places in the course, but I want you to notice that you can do this. I have been jumping out to a separate file to store the classes. Well, I want you to notice that I can put a class right here in this same module. Now, for some people, this is easier. Some people, it confuses them. I like my classes out here in separate class files so I can go to them and edit them and work with them. However you want to do this. But this is a class just like a regular separate class file, and I can instantiate an object of that class right up here. Notice it's within the same namespace as anonymous methods, but it is outside the partial class for Form 1. Now, what I want to do is instantiate an object of the reg method class. So reg method r equals new reg method. And then I want to instantiate an object of my delegate rmdel. So rmdel, I'm going to call this D. And so my delegate here is D, and I'm going to set that equal to r dot, and notice it sees add 50. There we go. And so notice I have now pointed, and I didn't spell that right. And you were probably yelling again, you don't have this right. And there we go. Okay, now notice when I point my method to my actual delegate, I don't have to mention the signature. The delegate already infers that. All right, so now what I want to do, now that I've got all my typing straight, and I'll leave that in there so you'll see it. We all struggle with that, right? And so what I want to do now is I want to create an integer variable called answer. And then I want to load that with whatever comes back from calling my delegate and passing it 25, right? And then I am just going to create a message box, show, and I'll say the delegate returned, then I'll concatenate whatever it returned, just like that. Okay, and so I'll execute that. We should get a message box back and we should be okay. But notice in doing this, we had to create a method down there called add 50. And so there it is, 50 plus 25 is there. Well, what if we were to do this with an anonymous method? Let's look at what that looks like, okay? So I'll do another rmdel, and this time I'll call it AD equals, and instead of pointing to a particular method, I'm just going to call the delegate keyword and put the signature of the delegate that I want to call. All right. Then I'm going to put the body of the delegate. All right. And so I'm just going to call return x plus 15 and close that out. And then down here at the bottom, I'll need to close that. That's kind of interesting there. I'll have to terminate that with a semicolon. Then I'm going to create another integer. This is my anon answer. And I'll set that equal to, I'll call AD, that's my delegate right here. So I'm calling it right here. And I'm going to pass 16 to it. Okay. And then I'm going to do my message box show, and I'm just going to copy this right here down to here, and I'll say the delegate returned, and I'll do a non-answer. All right. So if I run this again, I'm going to see two message boxes. I'm going to see two results, and you're going to see that they both do exactly the same thing. The first delegate returned 75. The second returned 31. I got the same functionality, but let me pull this up. In my first one, I actually had to create the delegate, point it to the method that I created in the class down here, and then execute it. In the anonymous method, I didn't even call a method. I put the method body after my delegate declaration right here, and it just ran it, loaded it in. So that is an anonymous method. Look at that example a few times till it makes sense to you, and then you'll be able to deal with these things a lot easier when you see them out there in code, and you'll be able to recognize them on the exam as well.